guys! I'm doing another mid-month wrap-up, so let's go over all of the books that I read in the first half of August. I actually ended up DNFing 2 books this month, which I haven't done in a very long time, so that's a bit unfortunate. The first book I picked up was actually the first book I DNF'd, and that was Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George. I remember seeing this book a lot in bookstores a couple years ago. I think I've had it on my TBR on Goodreads since like 2015, and I decided to finally pick it up, and then it turns out I really don't like it. It's sold as a story where an old man has this bookshop in Paris that he calls like the floating apothecary or something, and it's supposed to be about a guy who prescribes books for people's mental illnesses or emotional illnesses to try and treat these conditions, which sounds very interesting as a book lover. You can definitely relate to how books can help your emotional and mental well-being, but this book probably harmed my mental state because I was getting very annoyed. This book is not really about prescribing books to treat the soul. It's about an old guy who never got over an affair that he had with a married woman 20 years ago, so it's just so much time spent sighing over this woman. Literally for the first like 15% of the book, he wouldn't say her name, he would just sigh. And I was listening to this on audiobook, so he would actually sigh, and I was just like, can you stop, please? I didn't care for any of the plethora of characters because you're like meeting a bunch of different people, all the people he lives with in his house, and then everyone who comes to the bookshop, and it's just like I didn't care about a single one of them. And everything would lead back to this woman that he loved 20 years ago, and there was like nothing pleasant about this woman at all, and there's nothing interesting about this guy at all, and then there's the extra love story, and it's just like nothing was captivating. Plus there was also really weird writing where randomly thrown into the page the word like cock would come up, and it's just like, where did that come from? It was sort of trying to be this really fanciful, like descriptive lyrical writing, like set in Paris in this cute little bookshop, so it had that sort of tone, and then randomly it'd be just like cock, and I'm like, why? That was really very awkward and I really don't like it. So after 31%, I just got annoyed and I DNF'd it. The next book I read I also wasn't very pleased with. It was A Treasury of Royal Scandals by Farquhar, and this is an account of the most deplorable rulers in European history, both with morality and egos and also violence. And I thought the history itself was very interesting. I'm always really interested in European history, and so I enjoyed getting to know more about these rulers, but I really did not like the construction and the writing of this book. There was really minimal organization, so everything was split into, I guess, a type of scandal, and that was the chapters. But then throughout those chapters you're jumping all over Europe and you're jumping all over the timeline, and then some people would come up in one chapter and then they'd come up in the next one, but it's like so disjointed that I got very confused, and especially because a bunch of these rulers have the same name, it's very hard to keep track of like who's who when you're jumping all over the place, so I really did not like that. I mean, it makes sense when you organize it by the type of scandal, but at the same time it's very hard to track where all these people are going and where they all are in time. The writing itself also had a very condescending tone, which I personally don't like any sort of authorial voice in my history, but I guess some people might think it's more interesting if it's someone commenting on history, but it just annoyed me. When I'm reading history, I want to read the facts. I don't need the author's perspective on it. So I ended up reading this really quickly, but it wasn't something I was very happy with, and it's not something that I would recommend. Thankfully, the next book I actually really liked, and that was The Queen of Blood by Beth Durst. This is the first book in the Queens of Renthia series, and it's set in this world where everything in nature has a spirit, and all of the spirits are out to destroy the humans. The only thing that's protecting humanity from these bloodthirsty spirits is the queen, who has a magical power to keep all of the spirits in check. And this queendom is not passed down through inheritance, it's actually something that anyone can train for at school to gain the power to become the queen. And in this book we're following a girl who is going to one of these training schools to become the next queen. I liked pretty much everything about this book. The world is so interesting. It's set in this forest, and basically all the people live in the trees, in tree houses. No one lives on the forest floor, and so that makes for these really cool scenes of them like traveling, swinging through the trees, going on zip lines, like climbing things, and I really enjoyed that setting. But at the same time, you're told that there are other kingdoms around here that are not just the forest. There's like the ice kingdoms and stuff, and it has so much potential to broaden the world, and I'm so interested to see where it goes in the next couple books, because I'm sure we'll start getting more into all of the kingdoms around it. I really enjoyed the characters as well. They're not your typical YA fantasy characters. The girl you're following is not the strongest girl. She is actually pretty weak, and she has to fight and persevere to get to where she wants to be. So you're not just following like the boring, naturally talented, perfect at everything character. And I thought that was really refreshing. Also, the villain is very understandable, and it kind of makes you question your morals, which is just fascinating. It's always amazing when the villain has an understandable motive, and yet you know that what they're doing is wrong, but you can see where they're coming from and understand it, and it's just written so well. The plot is also very fast moving. It kept me tied in the whole time, and I wanted to know what happens next. I still want to know what happens next. I'm so excited to start the second book in the series, even though I haven't yet. I don't know why. But I will be getting on that very soon, because everything about this book makes me want to stay in it longer and to learn more and follow these characters and figure out what happens in this world. And I have not felt like that in quite a while, actually. I do have one small complaint, and that was certain plot points were a bit glossed over and they didn't seem like they had any consequences, which I'm questioning, but at the same time it was at the end of the book, so maybe it'll be addressed in the second book. I'm not sure. But that was the one small issue that I had. Everything else I really loved, and I did not expect to love it this much, but I'm so glad I did. The next book I read was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I finally picked up this book. This follows a ship's crew as they're traveling to the outskirts of the galaxy in order to build a new tunnel. But like I said before, the plot is not the important part of this story. It's actually mainly a character story, a character study, character-driven story. Words. It's about the characters. Each person in this crew gets a little section of this book, and it makes you care for all of them. Even ones that you were not really fond of in the beginning, by the end you get to know a little bit more about them, and they're more understandable and relatable. This is a very diverse and complicated universe because you're dealing with a bunch of different species, and through that the author puts in a bunch of morals about tolerance in the real world. And while that is amazing and definitely needed, at some points it felt very heavy-handed. And like I was being spoon-fed all of these lessons, and like every other page there was some lesson that you're supposed to take out of it. And yes, it's important and necessary, and I definitely appreciate it, but at times it would take me out of the story. So it felt more like a vehicle for teaching something rather than a story in itself, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I still really enjoyed this book. It's just something that I noticed. I mean, I still ended up loving these characters, and I cried at the end anyway, so there's also that. It's still emotional, and you get very invested in these people's lives, while also having the side of reminding you to be more accepting and understanding of the people around you in the real world. So I'm definitely going to continue the series. I actually got into a sci-fi kick for some reason. I kept wanting to read sci-fi, which is not a feeling I've ever experienced before, so that was really interesting, but I will be continuing the series in the future. The next book I read was Moving Pictures by Terry Pratchett. This is book 11, I want to say, in the Discworld series, and this one is about the people of the Discworld discovering the magic of movies. It's a very interesting Discworld take on modern technology. There was a lot of allusions to like classic Hollywood companies and movies, which was really enjoyable to see, even if I didn't fully catch all of them because I'm not a huge movie buff. But I did take a class on film in college, so I have a little bit of knowledge, but not really very much at all. Still, I think this book was one of the best ones so far that I've been reading in the beginning part of this Discworld series. The start of this book was kind of slow, but then once you reached a certain point, halfway through it, or maybe 75% through it, I was just like hooked and I kept wanting to read it. And I had a lot of fun with this book, so I'm glad it seems like the quality of the books are starting to pick up now, because the first couple books of the Discworld series are not the best. They're fine, they're humorous and interesting, but This one actually felt like it had more meat to the story, and it definitely appealed to me more. Next, I picked up Haru Matzobukhara, or Waiting for Spring, Volume 11 by Anashin. This is part of a cute little shoujo series that's ongoing that I really love. It's nearing the end of the series at this point. It's sort of wrapping up, and this volume specifically covers the big game that the whole series has been leading up to. As much as I love this series, I think my time away from it sort of dampened the experience because I forgot the characters and I forgot what's been happening in the story. I think it would have been much better if I read them back to back rather than it being disconnected, because I haven't read one in a very long time. And because of that, some of these characters' actions ended up looking a little bit cheesy to me, just because I don't fully remember the full character development and character arc of them, or I didn't when I went into it, and then by the time I finished the volume I sort of remembered it more. But because of that, it was a little bit different from what I was expecting, and I think that's just completely on me because I forgot the story. I still absolutely love it, and I love these characters so much, and I was still squealing the entire time. I'm very much looking forward to the next volume, but I heard that it's not coming out until December, which is really worrying, especially when I've already had this experience of reading it so far apart and feeling disconnected from the story. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm still very much looking forward to the end of this series. The last book I picked up is the second book I DNF'd so far this month, and that was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. This follows a thief who is sent back in time to steal a book that contains all of the secrets of magic. Before I go into what annoyed me about the story, I will give a few positives because there were parts of this that really interested me and kept me reading for as long as I did. I really loved the setting of this book. It's set in New York in the present day, in the 1920s and in the 1900s. I love learning about the history of New York. I've been many times and the history is just fascinating. I also really liked the magic in this book. I didn't read far enough to learn fully how the magic works or the extent of it, but from what I read so far, it was like you had these stones that could amplify your affinity for something. So our main girl has the affinity to travel time. The plot also caught my attention enough to make me want to figure out what happens later in the series, and it's really the only reason that I kept reading up to 16% because I was ready to DNF this in the first 2 pages. Which brings me to why I did end up DNFing this and why I really didn't like it. I think the main problem is it was just written way too young for me. The tone got on my nerves immediately. The second page, when we're introduced to the main character, I was already annoyed with her and the way that she talks and her smugness. All of her thoughts are like the pretentious, typical YA trope that it really gets on my nerves. The writing was trying too hard. It was trying to be super flowery and descriptive, and it just ended up convoluting the sentences to the point that they don't even make sense anymore. And all of these characters are super easy to read. There was something that I know is supposed to be a twist for later on in the book, and I immediately saw it. Everyone's motivations and their behavior is very simplistic and very obvious. What actually made me put it down though is I came across a very specific line, and it was the guy seeing the girl for the first time and saying, "She didn't look like the other girls." I slammed the book shut, and that's when I stopped. I just couldn't get on with the characters or storytelling at all. I was still interested in the plot, so I ended up looking up spoilers. I'm not going to say any spoilers if you still want to read it, but everyone was saying that the ending was amazing and incredible and they wanted to read the next book immediately. So I was like, I want to know what actually happened. I looked it up. I'm still very glad that I put down this book because it was just absolutely ridiculous. So I DNF'd this at 16%. I should have DNF'd it much earlier, but I wanted to make sure. I still think this has the potential to be a really good book to people, but you have to be willing to put up with a bunch of YA fantasy tropes and a very YA tone. If you're an adult fantasy reader, I would not recommend this at all. So those are all of the books that I've read in the first half of August. I am participating in Disney-A-Thon, so some of these books do count for some of the prompts. At this point in time, I'm almost done with all of my Aladdin prompts. I obviously DNF'd the group book, so I won't be completing that prompt because our special ability doesn't cover DNFing the group book, which is unfortunate because that's the book that I DNF'd. But I just have one more book to read, and it's a small volume of manga that I need to pick up from the library. And then that will be done, and I will be moving on to the other worlds. That's everything for now, though. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, especially if you read The Last Magician, and what you thought about it, because there are so many 4 and 5 star ratings on that book, and pretty much no 1 or 2 star ratings, which is what I would give it. I do not rate the books that I DNF, but I would put it at a 1 or 2 star, and I just feel so very alone. So if you feel the same way, or if you don't, please let me know why. I hope your August is going well so far, and I will see you soon. Bye! I also thought the plot was very interesting. Oh my god, how many times can I say interesting?